Today, I'm joined by someone whose career stretches across medicine, biotech, venture capital, and decades of company building. Dr. John Abeles started his physician's career in the UK before moving to senior roles with Sterling Drugs, with Pfizer back in the 75, around 1975 or so, and with Revlon Healthcare. From there, he became the first full-time MD trained healthcare analysis on Wall Street. Is that true?
Yes, indeed. I was in the pharmaceutical industry. I had a couple of brokerage accounts, and the research I was getting on the biopharma space was lacking, let's say, in depth and insight. So I thought to myself, well, there's got to be a career path for somebody here. And I accessed an executive search firm, and they showed me around to many of the finance houses on Wall Street. And eventually, I had several offers, but I chose to be with Kidder Peabody in 1975. And I was joined by two other analysts. The other analysts were following things from a strictly financial point of view. And I was there to analyze the science and of the big pharma companies, the pipelines, and prognosticate either success or failure, and estimate the marketplace for them and the reception they may have, and also answer to emergency news items that may influence these companies from a scientific point of view. And I studied also the progress of the FDA and regulation. I studied disease incidences and things arising in medicine in general that may be impactful. So yes, I was the first full-time with Kidder, and there had been other doctors who had kind of been accessed as part-time opinions, by other analysts in other houses, but none had ever joined as a full-time analyst officer of the investment bank as I did.
You must have been really impactful in that situation. I was wondering, like, do you have any? You got to have like some kind of war stories from the time, like the Wolf of Wall Street kind of stories.
Oh, I have war stories that would curdle your milk about reactions from various pharma companies to the things I was saying. There was a cause célèbre I got involved with in the time of the launch of Tagamet, which is, as you know, an anti-ulcer drug that works, or there's several successors to that drug. But at the time, it was a highly anticipated major drug, and I had gotten some feedback from researchers in England that there may be some form of risk in taking these in regard to stomach cancer or esophageal cancer. And while it wasn't a out-and-out recommendation to sell, my bringing up this heretofore unrecognized risk factor caused a lot of consternation. And
I can imagine.
yes, and the SmithKline was not happy, and I had a whole how to do with them, and we put it to bed by my showing that I was being fairly sincere about all aspects of this, both the fact there was a risk and that there was no way to quantify the risk, and therefore it was not a whole recommendation to sell, but nonetheless selling did happen at the time, and it all recovered later. But curiously enough, many years later, I would say that it was recognized that there was an extraordinary increase of esophageal cancer, cancer of the gullet, in especially in well-to-do families who are taking, and so there was an association, actually a very close association between the growth of these kinds of molecules, especially of Tagamet itself, and the incidence of esophageal cancer. It still has not been resolved that there is a causality there, but nonetheless, the index of suspicion that rests, and I'm still suspect of drugs which have a profound effect on the acidity of the stomach. And we know that when you cut the nerve to the stomach, and the old treatment of ulcers was cutting the nerve and stopping the acid production. When you do that, stomach cancer is common. And so when you suppress the acid, it seems that it may give rise to influences that may be suspect. Yeah.
Oh, that's so interesting.
Mhm.
The obviously that stomach acid is there for a purpose.
Stomach acid is indeed there for a purpose. It's a powerful antiseptic. When you're swallowing food, you're swallowing a lot of organisms, and stomach acid is a very powerful way of neutralizing those organisms. It also has an effect, ancillary effect on digestive, aspects as well. Um, but yeah, it's mostly I think its primary effect is protective, and so when you remove that protection, bugs grow, and these bugs may have an influence on the mucosa, and therefore you have this problem. I'm not saying that people should drop all these drugs at the moment, but there are ways of countering this by taking vitamin C and vitamin E, which mop up the products of these bacteria and the transformations they make in food, so that you protect yourself in that way too. So I did put that in there, but the consternation was profound. Anyway, that's anecdotal, the life of an analyst on Wall Street when you provoke a management in any way, it
I can
sometimes can
imagine
come.
there was some fireworks that you had to deal with for that.
Yeah, but we became respectful of each other, and nothing ever emanated. And in fact, SmithKline was successfully acquired later. Um, and so everyone came out happy.
That's amazing. The if it's too personal question, don't answer. Right, we can just skip it. But is Wall Street where you met your wife?
No, I was at Wall Street. I'd joined Kidder Peabody in late uh, in 73 or so, and I met her in 75. Um, so I met my wife on the streets of New York. It was a very happy circumstance. I married her 3 months later after meeting her, and we've
Oh,
been
that's not
married now
fast at
for.
all.
And no, we were engaged in 3 weeks and married in 3 months,
Oh well.
and we've been married 50 years now, six grandchildren, three adult children. She's an opera singer, classical music singer, and I have a diploma in classical piano from the Royal College of Music in London, and she. She was gorgeous, first of all, and then she was also much aligned with me in music. She's a singer, I was a pianist, and we were going to the same acting studio by happenstance. I
Uh-huh.
was in my youth. I was an amateur actor at school and
Okay.
university, but I had gone to the acting school to meet girls. I mean, I
Oh,
thought, well,
clever.
that's a very clever way of
Yeah, I
meeting.
gotta tell my sons to try this.
Yeah, yeah. So, but I met her actually not at the school, but in the street, and we just happened to be going to the school. So it served me well because
Oh,
it was another
congratulations. Yeah.
point of contact, and we got married in Westport, Connecticut, and where I was practicing part time as a doctor. And while I was working both in the industry, pharmaceutical industry, and later on Wall Street. Yeah, and I saw patients on weekends essentially.
That's exciting. Do that to kind of like keep your skills up, or you just had too much energy to deal with, and or
Well, I,
like that's a
I
lot,
didn't,
like between
you know,
school
when
and
when I had come
acting.
from London, I was doing the same thing. When I was in pharmaceutical industry, I started practicing in London as a doctor after I'd done my residencies in Birmingham. All my medical degrees and my pharmacology degree were at the University of Birmingham in England. Originally, I'm from Africa. I
Zimbabwe.
brought,
What's now?
it was then Rhodesia, now Zimbabwe. And when I was there, it was Rhodesia, and the Rhodesian University, and now the Zimbabwean, at the time was under the aegis of the University of Birmingham. So that all my medical studies in Rhodesia were supervised and visiting professors, the curricula, the exams, the standards, and all of that were set by Birmingham. So it became a kind of an external campus to the Birmingham Medical School. And I then went back to Birmingham on a British Council scholarship to do my pharmacology degree for a while, interrupting my medical studies. Came back to Birmingham at the end and did my hospital training in Birmingham itself. And then went to London as a young doctor and recruited in the pharmaceutical industry, but I never really wanted to leave seeing patients at the time. I left seeing patients in 1980 later because things became heavy when I was no longer at Kidder and had gone out on my own in 1980 as a medical advisor to companies and venture companies and that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's a lot of work. The whole venture capital world is like a flood of work in short bursts. How do you describe it? Actually, let me ask: is it really like a as heavy workload as people say?
You can. It depends on what you take on for yourself, but it has a way of infiltrating your waking hours. Let's put it that way, and sometimes your non-waking hours, um, because of the risks involved. But it went like this. When I was a kidder, towards the end of my sojourn there, which was about 5 or 6 years, there were small companies had heard of me and were coming to Kidder and saying, "We'd like you to follow our stock, raise us money, give us advices, be on our boards, all that kind of thing." I was very interested in these companies because they were very cutting edge in medicine, um, both in the med tech and the biopharma space. I was more au fait with the biopharma, at the
Uh-huh.
time. I'm a pharmacologist trained as well as medical trained, and so um, I said I'd like to work with these companies somehow, and my bank said no. We don't want an officer being involved with risky situations. From a legal point of view, they were timorous, and I said, well, if I'm not an officer anymore, and you keep me as a consultant, maybe I can have my feet in both camps, and so they did. They kept me as a continuing consulting analyst, a non-officer. I then
Okay.
moved to the Bay Area from New York, where all the action was, and I became an advisor to emerging biotech companies there, as well as becoming active with emerging med tech companies as well, and these advices were not only cash, but I got sort of incentive stock options. Those became equity. The equity became money, or at least potential money. And after 10 years of all of this, I had a fairly substantial capital gains pool. And my wife's family, all Chicagoans, had decided to move en bloc, en masse, down to Florida to away
Uh-huh.
from the tundra to the tropics. You see, so
Right.
and so
Climate.
her family had mother, father, brother, aunts, cousins, grandparents. Uh,
Why
they
did
were
they move
all
with you in the Bay?
no, they had already gone to Florida. So when the time came, and there was also schooling issues that we were living in California, there was not available to us many easily available private schools for my kids because we're outside of the Bay Area on the East Bay. Um, and we went to Florida, found out wonderful schools down in South Florida, and no capital gains tax and no income tax and asset protection, aspects. And there was a ready-made family for my wife, and so we moved in
And with 3 kids,
'93.
it kind of makes sense.
Yes,
Was
yeah.
this before you had the kids or after?
No, after we had 3 kids with us.
Uh-huh.
And
So, okay, yeah.
so the youngest grew up in Florida. The older one still remembers something of California. Um, but we kept a footprint in California, and I go back there often. I've started companies since then that are Californian. I've been the chairman of a company out of Stanford, And I was also attached to the College of Chemistry at the University of California at Berkeley, which is a very famous and very prestigious college of chemistry. Many Nobel Prize winners were there and emanated from there.
Yeah, I was surprised not to see a Nobel in your portfolio, or is it one you're hiding?
I don't. The closest I've ever come to a Nobel was my best friend from Rhodesia had become a professor at Berkeley and was very world famous in his research on nuclear magnetic resonance. And he invited me, in fact, to be on the advisory board of the College of Chemistry, and I was an advisor there for about 6 or 7 years. And it was a rich experience. I'm also attached still, but it's not very active. I'm attached to an institute at the University of Kansas, which University of Kansas was always very famous for its clinical pharmacology department. And I got attached to a biosciences institute there, given to neuroscience and also immunology, which have been the two themes that have predominated in my venture activities with biopharma.